Well, I'm Jeff Regina. I'm the chapter president of the JACL here in Monterey. Welcome to we haven't done one of these in a long time, so thank you so much for coming out. This traffic in this peninsula, this neck of the woods is just terrible. So thank you for coming out and fighting that. I'm sure it's wonderful for our cities and stuff like that. If you're here, you hear our distinguished panel here to talk about some really important things that we have not discussed here at this building in a long time. So we thought, as a group, we need to do these kind of things occasionally just to promote this. And we're happy that you're here today. I wish we had more, but you know what? The people that are here, and that's awesome. I'm also here now to introduce the outstanding city officials who took time out of their busy days. I'm sure they're crammed with multiple things to take care of and take the time to show that they care. And first I'd like to introduce the mayor of Pacific Grove, Bill Kemp. All right. Representing the city of Seaside is mayor candidate Ian Oldesby. And representing the city of Monterey, representing this wonderful town here, is the Honorable Clyde Roberson. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days. I'm now going to hand this over to Carolyn McCombs, the president of our Heritage Committee. Carolyn?
Thank you, Jeff. I'd also like to welcome all of you and thank you so much for coming out to our. We've had a series of lecture programs in the past, but we've been through remodeling the building and some other projects, and so we haven't done one of these for a while. So we're pleased that all of you have come back, and we're very honored to have a distinguished panel. I'll tell you a little bit about our project. We are very small group of volunteers who work under the Japanese American Citizens League of the Monterey Peninsula. And we have a museum downstairs, which is currently being remodeled. So, and many of the artifacts are with the San Jose Japanese American Museum. Well, we're being remodeled. Hopefully they'll all be back the first of the year. We can celebrate the opening, and hopefully all of you will come back to see it. But we are, as a group, our mission is to preserve cultural heritage and legacy of the Japanese Americans in the Monterey Peninsula. We also have a lot of issue memorabilia and history, as well as information on the internment. So when our museum opens, please come back and see what we have. At this time, I'd like to introduce Elliot Ruchowitz-Roberts, who is going to be our moderator, and he will introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you, Elliot.
Well, welcome all. And first, I'd just like to thank Jeff and Larry Oda and David Yamada, Carolyn, and members of the JACL Heritage Committee for organizing and sponsoring this panel, because it really is important in terms of how our community responds to what's happening in the world around us. Abdel was kind enough to send me a link to a story that appeared on July 28th in the Washington Post. And a woman by the name of Eliza Thompson walked out one morning, and in her driveway she found a plastic baggie. And in the plastic baggie it was filled with birdseed and a flyer. And the flyer was from the KKK. And it said, "Wake up, white America." And in it, it had derogatory claims about immigrants, about Jews, about blacks. And she didn't quite know what to do with this. And she found that some of her other neighbors had found these in her driveway. And she was so outraged that she decided she really had to respond. And so she ordered 10 signs that people could put on their lawns. Hate has no home here. She got 200 baggies, filled them with candy, with a note calling for unity. And then she put these messages from the KKK on her, through the media, through through on our Facebook page to show people what they had been presented with. And the response was so overwhelming, she ended up ordering 250 more anti-hate signs, had an incredible response from the community. And what Licia Brooks from the Southern Poverty Law Center said about this, if there is no community response, the purveyors of hate take that as a sign that their hate is welcome or there is indifference. Our community is responding to now with this panel to the purveyors of hate who are using hate as a wedge to justify depriving us of our civil liberties, of our civil rights. Our current national government and the people emboldened by its actions and rhetoric have left little plastic bags filled with hate in our driveway. And this is our way of responding to it. That we're telling them your hate is unwelcome, we are not indifferent, but committed to maintaining, defending, and expanding civil rights right now. And hopefully this panel discussion will empower each of us by showing us the ways in which we can respond, in which our voices can be heard, ways in which we can, on the local, state, and national levels, make a difference. In introducing the panel members, I think you all have their bios in the wonderful program that David Yamada has put together. And so I don't want to go over that, but I thought to give a context for what they're going to say, it would make more sense to talk about the organizations with which they're intimately associated, since much of what they do regarding civil rights is done through these organizations. And so, just first myself, I serve on the board of directors of the Monterey County chapter of the ACLU of Northern California, and also on the ACLU board of the ACLU of Northern California. The mission of the ACLU of Northern California is to serve as an enduring guardian of justice, fairness, equality, and freedom, working to protect and advance civil liberties for all Californians. In response to the current attacks on civil liberties, we're vigilantly working in the courts, in the legislatures, and in communities to maintain the promise of freedom, justice, and equal opportunities for all. In case you didn't know, nationwide, the ACLU has 1.7 million members, up from 500,000 before the 2016 election. And if you think that's impressive, 1.75 million, the National Rifle Association has 5 million members. Okay, so just to put things in context. But 1.7 is terrific. The ACLU is the nation's largest public interest law firm. It has over 100 staff attorneys and 2,000 volunteer attorneys who are involved in 2,000 cases annually. Once again, to put that in perspective, the Department of Justice has 14,000 attorneys. And that's who we're fighting right now, right? The ACLU has 52 affiliates, one in every state. There are 3 in California. We're in the affiliate, the ACLU of Northern California, and it has 170,000 members. And it's the largest and most influential affiliate in the country. So if you're not a member, you should become a member, right? Okay. The issues it works on are technology and civil liberties, voting rights, criminal justice, education equity, free speech, immigration rights, LGBT equality, privacy, racial justice, and reproductive justice as well. Francisco Lopez, sitting all the way in the counter, serves as president for the Monterrey Council 2895 of the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC. I don't know, how many people have heard of LULAC before? Good, okay. And its mission is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of Hispanic Americans through community-based programs. It was founded in 1929. It's the oldest Hispanic civil rights organization in the U.S. It has over 1,000 local councils nationwide. In our area, there are 4. Is that correct? 4. Monterey County, which is located in Castroville, the Monterrey Council, which is in Monterrey, the Salinas Valley, and the LULAC Council 2055, also in Salinas. It engages in both programming and advocacy, voter registration, citizen awareness sessions. It sponsors health fairs and tutorial programs, offers scholarships to students, and responds to xenophobia and anti-Hispanic sentiment. It does not have a legal department, but it is active in litigation, and two cases that stood out for me, just to give you a sense, because even though they occurred long ago, they seem really very current. And that's in 1945, a California LULAC council sued the Orange County School District because it segregated Mexican-American children, characterizing them as more poorly clothed and mentally inferior to white children. And in 1954, it brought action against the state of Texas, where no Mexican-American citizen had ever been called to jury duty. Hopefully we've come a little way from there. And as of April of this year, Francisco was elected Deputy District Director for California LULAC District 12, which encompasses Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito counties. So that's Francisco. Regina Mason serves as President of the Monterey County branch of the NAACP. The NAACP was founded on February 12, 1909, and it's the oldest civil rights organization in the nation. It has some 2,200 chapters and 500,000 members in the United States. It has a very active legal department. One of the cases it's currently working on is a lawsuit in Connecticut about prison gerrymandering, where they count, if someone is in prison, they count that as the person's residence. So for voting issues, whereas that district gets a heavier balance, and of course disproportionately affects people of color. It's also in Prince George's County, Maryland. It's suing the federal government regarding the 2020 census, which it maintains will substantially undercount African American and other people of color throughout the U.S. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. Its vision, to ensure a society in which all individuals have equal rights without discrimination based on race. One of the leaders, the Chief President and Chief Executive Director of the NAACP from 2008 to 2013 was Benjamin Todd Jealous, who grew up in Pacific Grove, went to local schools, was mentored by Mel Mason and Regina, and is now running as a Democratic candidate for the governor of Maryland. The NAACP identifies 6 game changers, it calls them, issues that they're really committed to: economic sustainability, education, health, public safety and criminal justice, voting rights and political representation, expanding youth and adult engagement. So that's Regina's organization. Larry Oda served on the National Board of Directors of the Japanese American Citizens League, the nation's oldest and largest Asian American civil rights organization. He served as national president from 2006 to 2010. The mission of the JACL is to secure and safeguard the civil and human rights of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans and all communities that are affected by injustice and bigotry, and to promote and preserve the heritage and legacy of the Japanese American community. It was founded in 1929. It is the oldest and largest Asian American civil rights organization in the U.S. It has 7 council districts and 100 chapters. The Monterey Peninsula chapter is part of the Northern California Western Nevada Pacific Council. And currently, its major issues are immigration, the Muslim ban, indefinite detention, and marriage equality. Since 2014, Larry served as chairperson of the board of directors of the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation, which created a memorial in Washington, D.C. dedicated to education and public awareness about the internment of 120,000 Japanese Americans by the U.S. government in World War II. And it's there to remind Americans that what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II must not happen again to any other people, regardless of race, religion, or national origin, and to remind the American people that great nations can also admit and redress great mistakes. Abdel Kader Seck is president of the board of directors of the Islamic Society of Monterey. It was founded in 1965, and its goal is to establish an Islamic community center that can provide educational, social, and spiritual environment to Muslims with a special emphasis on Muslim youth, preparing them for the challenges of education and maintaining a firm commitment toward Islamic values and ideologies. The 2010 U.S. religious census identified 2,518 individuals who identified as Muslims, which was 6% of the county's population at that time. He's also co-founder of Jews, Christians, and Muslims United, an initiative to fight injustice, promote tolerance, unity, and peace in the world. And it's a grassroots movement, hoping to show that the world that peaceful coexistence can exist between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and is not a naive and distant dream. Brian Bahari, a pastor and homeless advocate, says, "Hatred and violence can be vanquished by understanding and working with each other. It's crucial that we as a community learn about one another and live as neighbors, even if we have religious differences." So, as you can see, just an incredible spectrum of groups covering a wide range of issues. And so each panelist now will talk from his or her own perspective. What are the challenges that they see facing us now regarding civil rights? And we'll be also talking about, I think, their own personal experiences. We will ask for questions and provide answers afterwards. And we are going to have, if while someone is speaking you have a question, raise your hand and someone will come to you with a card and pencil so you can write your question down. Okay? Okay, who would like to begin? Abdel?
Thank you. Thank you to the JACL for putting together this forum. Glad to be here. As David, is this loud enough? As David was putting this together in our correspondences back and forth, I realized he was supposed to be out of town on a business trip. But considering the importance of today's topic, I canceled. And when I found out who my co-panelists were going to be, I couldn't miss this opportunity. It's a great pleasure sharing the podium with you. As a Muslim, black man, and an immigrant, it's unquestionable that I am at the epicenter of what we're here to discuss today. Given this country has come a long way when it comes to civil rights, we are only 3 days away from the 55th anniversary of the Washington March and the speech of Dr. King, "I Had a Dream" in Washington. That was 1963, the 23rd this month, the 28th this month. So who would have imagined then that less than 50 years later we would have had a black man in the White House? Yet it happened. That tells you about the amazing country that we live in. But it has an ugly side too. Right? And in the campaigns of 2016, we've heard Islamophobic rhetoric such as banning the Muslims and building a wall and things of that kind that would set us back hundreds of years. The example that Elliot just shared with you, that article in the Washington Post, also said that as you read this blacks are taking over your country. Okay, these are verbatim rhetorics that we could have imagined 200 years ago, not in 2018, yet they happen. So although I know that as far as being a black man and an immigrant, my co-panelists have my back, I will focus on my perspective as an American Muslim or Muslim living in America, and share that though it's not today's topic, Muslims have been in this country for centuries. Okay? If you hear the rhetorics, you would imagine or think that we just got here and we need to be kept away. Not the fact. We've been here for many centuries. However, the problem of calling Muslims names, the rhetorics of wanting to keep them outside this country, have to be addressed by Muslims themselves, and we don't see enough of that. Now, living in Monterey County, this amazing place where we don't see much of that, we might think we're okay, but we're not. That article shows it. It is our responsibility as people that care to come out, and every time there is such a thing as a ban, the Muslim rhetoric, we come out and say no. I think 2.5 years ago, we were part of a big rally right across McDonald's on their money. Over 300 people came out. This is as soon as he signed his executive order saying that he's going to ban Muslims. I'm sure a lot of you were there. You could see kids, American kids, people that are born in this country like my children holding signs saying no to this. We cannot sit back and think that everything is rose because we live in Monterey County. Everything is not rose. There are ignorance out there. There are people that do not know. And ignorance leads to misunderstanding that will lead to fear. And before you know it, one group will abuse the other's civil rights. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you for having us.
Great. I'll go next. I'm Regina Mason, president of the Monterey County branch of the NAACP, and it is a pleasure to be here on this evening, this afternoon, and it is more of a pleasure to, for the first time, come into JACL Hall. I've never been here, but my niece, who I raised when she was in high school, would come to dances here. So when I thought about this place, I thought, wow, this is really interesting that Japanese have a heritage center of their own. And when I think about my people of African ancestry, that we've been here and helped build the seaside area primarily and Salinas, and we have nothing, not anything. And so I basically today am really, it is an honor to be here on this panel with the distinguished people that I'm here with, and we definitely are in solidarity with each of them and each of your groups. I bring you greetings on behalf of Leon Russell, our chairman of our board, Derek Johnson, our president and CEO, and Alice Huffman, our California and Hawaii State Conference president. I have been a part of the NAACP for approximately 30 years, and I am serving as its president since January of 2017. And I just, on this past Thursday, submitted a leave of absence because I am now an official candidate for a Seaside City Council seat. So, and while I will be running for council, I am still going to be doing a lot of the work with the NAACP in terms of what we do here. But one of the things I kind of want to talk to you about is the fact that all politics is local. And when you think about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King over 50 years ago, talking about the three evils of society. He talked about racism, materialism, and militarism, and they remain the three evils of society. And when you think about the plight of underserved people in Monterey County and in all parts of this country, people of African ancestry are at the bottom. Economically, our children have lower test scores and are doing poor in just about every area that you can think of. And I actually was over at the Monterey County jail recently, and I thought, wow, this is a new prison for people of color, because it's black and brown people in this country that are incarcerated. And so I am very happy that the NAACP collaborates with all groups, and it is not an African American organization. It was founded by sons and daughters of slave-holding families, Quakers that allowed people of color to gain freedom through slavery when Harriet Tubman was on the Underground Railroad. And so the NAACP has aligned itself historically with good white people and all people. And we are accepting of all groups of people. We are the first ones to support marriage equality in this country. And our California State Conference led the way for the marriage equality laws. And the NAACP has been an organization in this country that has put forward every major law that happened to bring about change. And so I am very pleased to be a part of the NAACP. However, I have to tell you that when you look at the realities of what people in this country are going through, we regress back to pretty much slavery. You see children that are being detained by the Trump administration because they're escaping poverty and all kinds of different brutalities. And they're not only children of Latin countries. These are children also that are coming from African countries as well. And people aren't talking about that. So I also, in Monterey County, the NAACP and LULAC have formed together to have the LULAC NAACP coalition. And one of the things that we're going to be dealing with are all the issues that are happening for people that are in underserved communities, particularly African American people and people of Latin descent. And we will be joining with other groups eventually, but right now it's about self-determination, because we as people of, particularly people of African ancestry, have not had the opportunity to have self-determination. The NAACP, on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination in April, led a march from Friendship Baptist Church to Victory Temple Church of God in Christ in Seaside, and we launched the Poor People's Campaign for Self-Determination and Economic Justice. And that's what we're going to be looking at moving forward, is economic justice. Because without economics, we cannot acquire and overcome the challenges that are faced by people that are living in low-income communities, and it is by design. When you think about the fact that we're here, 50 years later, and we're still dealing with the kind of poverty that people have. And I just came from the National Convention this past July, and it was about don't hate, vote was the theme. And right now, the Poor People's Campaign is looking at mobilizing people in Monterey County to ensure that people get out and vote. And one of the things that happens with your vote is its power. People died so that we could vote. You know that we could not vote as people of African ancestry at one time in this country. And with the Trump administration at this point in time rolling back everything that we have fought and struggled for, it's just really time for all of us to come together. I'm also happy that Whites for Racial Equity has formed, because we need white people to deal with a lot of these issues that are happening to people of color, because white people can talk to other white people about what's going on. Because we've been doing this for many, 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 many years, and as Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the bottom line, though, is that we all must work together, all people. And if you really want to bring about change, we need all of our comrades by our side. That's white, black, Latino, Muslim, and you know, I just can't tell you how important it is that people register and vote, because we're putting people in office in all of our communities, and yet you see that there's a new jail going up in Monterey County that's 3 stories high, instead of getting some prevention services into our community to deal with community policing, for example. The police are the #1 people that send cases to the district attorney's office. And most of those cases are people that come to the NAACP, and I'm in these jails, and I'm in schools where people are so poor that they cannot afford an attorney, and I'm certainly not an attorney. But I basically go because they have no one else, and this is just wrong. So we need people to help vote people in office that are going to bring about real change and make sure that people have self-determination throughout this county, and especially the most underserved people, which are really the African Americans in Monterey County, because our people, we don't have businesses, we don't have anything, and it's really those people that come to us that need us to advocate for them. And we basically aren't designed, we're a civil rights organization, we're not supposed to do a lot of the things that we do, but if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So I think that when you think about economics and voting, that resonates with the NAACP, because if we don't put people in office that control the purse strings in our cities, for example, the City Council of Seaside recently put forward $100,000 and some odd for school resource officers. Well, we're not opposed to law enforcement, but what we're opposed to is having police our children in our schools, because therein lies where this school to prison pipeline comes from. And I know this for a fact because we have several cases before us where I am personally and other people are showing up to court for these juveniles that are getting arrested on their campuses. If you don't know that this is impacting your children, you wouldn't know about it. But it's black and brown children that are being impacted, and people that are from dominant groups don't have to worry about this, because they don't have to think about their kids going to jail and their not having money to pay for an attorney and all of those kinds of things. And so, you know, I really think that we really have to do something about this. And so I'm just elated to be here and to talk further about some of the things that the local branch is working on, and through the Poor People's Campaign and in collaboration with LULAC. And now that I have met Abdel, we will be working with the Muslim community. One of the things that happened when I first took over as president of the branch is we're defeating Islamophobia and all of the other phobias that exist in our country, because we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people that are impacted, and they happen to be people of color. And so without further conversation about this, I will turn it over to another colleague.
Hello, thank you for having me here on behalf of LULAC. As you know, my name is Francisco Lopez. I am the president of the local council, 2895. Here, also in attendance is our council vice president, Jesse Perez, our council youth advisor, Guada Perez, and our secretary and treasurer and state foundation representative, Kader also here with us today. One of the most memorable comments or quotes by a local resident, and when I first met him, hearing him speak, Mr. Mason, was and I'm pretty sure it was said somewhere else, but it really struck to me when he said it was, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it really struck a chord with me because it entailed what civil rights and advocacy is, and its truest, most core grassroots effort is being involved, being out there, advocating for yourself, for your community, for your neighbors. It's something that we need to continue in this conversation and here at this panel. I know that there's been plenty of work done. There's people here with a vast amount of history and efforts and achievements, and all of those have come about because they decided to take a stance. They decided to show up to these panels, to form part of these organizations, the JACL, the NAACP, LULAC, ACLU, and all these organizations. And I think that's what community advocacy is about, is for us to come together. We know that there's issues that have affected greatly our predecessors, our local community has Mr. Abdel mentioned, has a not so good history. And there are going to be dark times where people are going to come in and have done bad things to our community. But I think that the greater good lies here in this community, in this room itself right now. People coming here and hearing us, us representing you guys, us talking together, holding questions, conversations. How can we better our communities, cultivate our leaders through education and guidance, and empower our communities through advocacy, through knowing that there's such a thing as the right to vote. As Regina mentioned, people die to the right to vote, and we can't let that just go in vain. We need to make sure that the struggle, the fight, the unity, the solidarity continues, and that way we can make sure that we continue on the path forward towards our collective goals, to lay down our bricks and prepare that for the latter generations to come, and to show them that the struggle continues, the struggle goes on, there will always be issues at hand. But we, as a community together, we form a greater good, that no matter what evil comes our way, we will definitely be able to collaboratively, as a unified group, make a better difference and overcome these issues. And with that, I'm greatly thankful for the invitation, and I look forward to your questions and your dialogue as we move forward in this discussion panel. Thank you.
I'm very humbled to be here sitting on this panel because my cohorts up here are very articulate, and hearing their perspectives is very valuable to me, and I hope it is to you too. I wanted to give a little bit of background. I think in my bio it says I was born in an internment camp in Crystal City, Texas. I think that being born in basically a concentration camp focused my life a little bit. I think that having that in my background, being born in a prison, and for the reason of my ethnicity, and it has shaped my life as I've grown up, because it wasn't something that I did. It was something that the way I looked. And growing up, I always tried to do things correctly and not bring attention to myself, because otherwise I could be snatched up and blamed for something else. The 10 War Relocation Authority camps are pretty well known. They were designated a National Park Service historic site, those 10 camps. But there were another 17 Justice Department camps, like where I was born. Crystal City was unique in that it was a family camp. There weren't only Japanese, but there were German Americans and a huge population of the Latin American Japanese. The Latin American Japanese were basically kidnapped from their countries, and the United States took them in to use them as prisoner exchange. There were a few of them that were sent back to Japan speaking Portuguese. They didn't know Japanese, and it was very difficult for them. But we're talking about civil rights today, so it's just a sidebar, I think, to our story. Now, my being born in an internment camp shaped my life. I think it sensitized me to civil rights, to the wrong that's been foisted upon other communities, and made me want to make things better for everyone else. I have to tell you that when I was president of JACL, we were fat, dumb, and happy. We fought the Arizona Senate bill that targeted immigrants, and we did fairly well. But then, when the election of 2016 came along, it was a huge wake-up call, because there were many of us that didn't think that the Republican candidate would have a chance. He was saying horrible things that we felt, because we were in our euphoric state, thought that everyone was on the civil rights bandwagon. And when he won, it was a big wake-up call, because there were folks that believed what he was saying, the hateful things that were being said. And even now we're going through a lot of turmoil, and it just redoubles our effort. I think that the JACL has always tried to, I think one of the things that we said was that we can't let this happen again. The unlawful detainment or incarceration of a group of people, but yet we're seeing that again now. We're seeing these folks that are seeking asylum from South America are being imprisoned, and their children separated from the families. I don't know. It's just wrong. And why are we letting that happen? And JACL and many other groups are protesting this, but the administration is thinks that it's the right thing to do, and there are folks that agree with them, and so we've got a huge fight ahead of us. We need to change that mindset. We talked about the vote. We need to get out to vote and rally the folks that have more reasonable thought processes, I guess, and have them go to the polls and put in people that are more reasonable and can help us. The JACL has a number of priorities, the immigration, protesting the immigration ban, protesting the Muslim ban. This country is based on immigrants. It was built by immigrants. And going through history, almost every immigrant group has gone through the same thing. that the Irish would never be assimilated into the United States culture because of, I don't know, their religion, or they were, they worked too hard or something, I don't know. But, the Irish, the Chinese, the Japanese, it goes on and on. I read an essay by Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave, but he was, through the generosity of some person, he got an education that wasn't available to many. But a brilliant man, but just listening to what he said in 1869, the arguments against, he was protesting I think the arguments to prevent Chinese from coming into the United States. And the arguments that were put forth to fight that, to fight the immigration of Chinese, are the same arguments that we hear today. We heard it protesting the Japanese coming into the country, and the Muslims, the South Americans, they could never be assimilated. They hold on to their culture too strongly, and they would never be good citizens. And if you go back, those claims have all been disproven. So I don't know. We need to have a more educated population, I guess, to someone that knows that knows the history, that and realizes that we can't keep on doing the same thing. The Japanese American Citizens League wants to. The reason we were able to pass redress was that our community said we can't let this happen again. But yet, it's happening again. So we're not working hard enough. And what do we do? I think Regina said it best, that we need to find our allies and work together and get out the vote. So I think I've gone long enough. But thank you for listening to me and vent a little bit.
All right.
So to pick up on what Francisco said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. What does it take to get at the table? But before that, just a comment, Larry, a response. I think, just from my own perspective, that it's not that we failed. It's more that things go in cycles. And the defense of civil liberties is a continuous effort. You can never take a breath. I mean, there are always forces that have interests which are trying to undermine the rights of individuals. So I don't think we should blame ourselves. I think this is kind of the nature of things. You never, in a way, you win the battle, but you never win the battle. You just always have to be vigilant. And if you're going to expect that as this period of peace, where we're all going to be, suddenly here we are, that's never going to happen. So maybe it's how, from my perspective, that's how I would look at it that way, which is that you just always have to be vigilant. And you have to have people to pass the torch on to. You need young people involved. You need people of every age involved. So, okay, so to Francisco, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. How do you get to the table?
As you mentioned, I think that it involves us being communicative and supportive of each other, generation through generation. An example is something that was mentioned previously at the coalition. One of our recent coalition meetings was from groups such as the Council of Elders, who have been there in years prior on the forefront of civil rights issues, mentoring and passing on past experiences to the current leadership, to the current leaders of today's organizations, reaching out to community members as well as the youth, like you mentioned, and having them be an active participant in current issues is what brings people to the table. Let them know that there's issues that are affecting our local community, not just a particular ethnic group. I, as a Latino, just speaking to my Latino community members, would be a disservice to the greater community. I know that it's my responsibility to also reach out to people who are being, to let them know different people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, and let them know that there are issues that are affecting not only my group, like the Latina group, but then also all minorities, and then every other issue within themselves. Because as it was mentioned by Mr. Mason, if we don't let people know of current issues, those issues will be addressed without your voice at the table. And as mentioned, metaphorically, you are on the menu, on the chopping block, as we would say, and we need to let them know that these issues will affect them with or without a voice. We usually have to accept the consequences, and we cannot let that happen. We must be proactive about these issues and be at the table.
Regina?
Yes, I concur with what Francisco said. We did bring the LULAC and NAACP elders together. We have this idea of having the wisdom of the elders and the strength of the young. And one of the things that's happening is young people have not been taught the history of civil rights in this country in terms of what has happened to the predecessors. They think that they have inherited a post-racial society because people died and fought for them so that they didn't have to not be able to go through the front door and so on and so forth. In terms of, in the sense that how do we move forward with being at the table, one of the things is looking at the data in terms of what happens in communities and looking at where are people on the economic ladder, what the graduation rates are, who's not doing well, and so on and so forth. And it starts with us coming together and doing an analysis and looking at the facts. You have to look at where you've come from and then move forward according to the data that exists. And so one of the things that we recently did in the NAACP is we are looking at self-determination for people of African ancestry. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we have a right to think for ourselves, to form our own opinions, and to make sure that services get put in place based on what our culturally congruent needs are. So we got together with a group of the African American pastors, and we set up a meeting with the district attorney's office, and we went and knocked on the door. We had this meeting to go and find out. We'd like to know what the data suggests in terms of why we have this out-migration of African people African Americans leaving Monterey County, and in particular Seaside, where are they? Where have they gone? And we know that they've gone, many of them, to prison. And so, you know, you have to do an analysis of what are the issues confronting your people. And then we cannot do it alone. When you look at the low numbers of African Americans in Monterey County, we need all people by our side to go knock on the door with us. Because right now, as I look at that county jail that's being built, who are the people that are going to be housed there? It will be black and brown people. And so what we have to do is, well, when we went to the district attorney's office, it was the first time that the whole group had got together to go there. And we wanted some data. And we were told that the district attorney does not keep race-related data. Well, then, so now we have to dig a little deeper. But we are going to continue that dialogue because, you know, our folks are being impacted greater than any other group economically and in other ways. And because our numbers are so low in Monterey County, but they're low in terms of numbers of people. But when you look at overrepresentation in child welfare, in lack of mental health services, in the criminal justice system, we're disproportionately overrepresented in every negative thing that happens in this county. And so we have to have self-determination. And in order for us to get a seat at the table, we have to go and figure out what seat do we want at the table. And then we come together with what we're doing with LULAC and with Abdel and others to ensure that we come together and come up with a plan. And that is being worked on as we speak. We are working on a plan right now in Monterey County so that we can have our seat at the table and that we can make decisions that are impacting our people. When you take a person out of their community and incarcerate them, you take away the livelihood of that community. You take away a mother's son, someone's father, someone's daughter, and then you put them in prison or in jail or wherever you put them, and they cannot be a participating member to contribute to the community, and it is all by design. It is not only happening in Monterey County. It's happening in all 58 counties in California, where you have small numbers of groups of people, and I'll just use people of African ancestry, and they're disproportionately, because I'm looking at data, and I see all throughout California, this is happening, and it's not just in California. When I went back to the National Convention in San Antonio, people of African ancestry all over this country are saying the same thing. So I think that you know, we have to make sure that the vote happens. We have to get out there and put people in office that are going to represent us. We need to put people in office that look like us, that are from our community, and not some long-term person that's in office just because of a name or any of that kind of stuff. What has happened historically to people, and that's one of the ways in which we can get a seat at the table, is to look at the data and to come up with a plan and to have self-determination.
Abdel?
One of the ways I think to avoid being on the menu is to participate, to be active, to make your voice heard. He put it very well, Francisco. I put people in three groups. The ones that make things happen, the ones that witness things happen, and the ones that wonder what happened. And I think the ones that ended up in the menu of the latter. So if I take the Muslims in Monterey County, that are at least 6,000, believe it or not, we are a group of professors at DLI, hundreds of us, of Muslims, teaching the American military how to speak at least 15 languages at DLI. We are professors, we are doctors, we are business owners, We are people that have something to say when it comes to the way of running the county. Therefore, we should not sit aside and be described as terrorists or called names and not come out and say, you're lying. We are not such and such. We are people that contribute to the development of America. This is how we avoid ending up on the menu. Because if you are accepting to be called a terrorist when you've never held a gun, it's your fault, I think, if you're labeled as so. Unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court has passed, the Muslim ban, because on its third version, Venezuela and North Korea were added to the ban. You tell me if they're Muslim countries. So that shows you that we're going back. We are going back. As everybody said here, we need to be aware and not sit comfortably in Monterey County and think that everything is rose. No, we're going back. You can't ban Muslims from entering the United States because you've entered North Korea and Venezuela, on the executive order. So that's my say on how to avoid ending up on the menu. We just need to come out there and represent ourselves instead of being represented by people who don't even know what we stand for.
So, prior to 1940, there were over 500 laws that were passed to prevent the Japanese from participating in society. And it was, a number of events, I think, after World War II that we were able to get some representation in Congress. And by 1970, we had a few members, and with our effort to gain an apology from the United States government for the unjust incarceration of 120,000 of our population during World War II. It wasn't just the handful of representatives and senators that we had. It was a collaboration with a number of other communities and members of Congress, senators, that we were able to do that. So it was a combination, we took ourselves off the menu by getting representation and also building coalitions with other groups. I think one of the first groups that joined us in the redress process was the American Jewish Committee, publicly supporting our effort. So, going back to the question, you get a seat at the table. By having the seat at the table, you have a say on what's on the menu. And if you don't want to be on the menu, you have your say.
Well, being a poet, I always pick up on the metaphoric statements. So it was, I think, Regina, you said you have to knock on doors, right? Which doors do you knock on? In other words, if you're going to be effective to bring about change, which doors do you have to knock on to make that change?
Well, I think you have to knock on all the doors when you get whatever your situation is that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with the educational system, then you knock on the doors of those that are holding the keys to the education in Monterey County. I know for a fact that there is something around education called the No Child Left Behind, not No Child, but the ESSA, Every Child Succeeds Act. And the NAACP has been extremely involved in education because, you know, way back when Brown versus Board of Education was passed. But so education, or it just depends on what door you need to knock on. But you need to knock on doors that control the purse strings of what is happening in Monterey County. If it's City Hall, you go and knock on that door. You have to participate in government. You've got to make sure that you have people represented at city council meetings, at school board meetings, at the board of supervisors meetings. There are tons of different commissions and so on and so forth that are making decisions, and unfortunately not all people are engaged in the process. And many people that are underserved are extremely unengaged, and it's not because they don't want to be engaged. It's because they're trying to put food on the table. They're working 2 and 3 jobs now because you can no longer work one job and have retirement and benefits. Employers are pretty much hiring people part-time. So many people that come to us have 2 and 3 jobs that they're working on. So to go and sit at a school board meeting is not going to happen for some parents. However, they still need representation. And so the doors that you knock on are all doors that control the purse strings, because really it boils down to a fair distribution of the economics in Monterey County. The resources that come into this county that are supposed to be designed to help all people, and they're not helping all people, and I can tell you for a fact because we have so many countless cases that are before us dealing with everything from criminal justice to education to people getting kicked out of public housing. So, you know, the thing is that, and if you don't have your basic needs met, there are kids going to school hungry every day. And I happen to be also the co-founder of an agency called the Village Project. And the Village Project provides culturally congruent services. Everybody should be entitled to culturally congruent services based on facts of what people know in terms of how to work with that culture. It shouldn't be some outsider coming in, making a decision on what service you're going to get. It should be right there from your community, resources in your community, from the community, and not by others. And that's what's happened historically to people of African ancestry, is that they've had to rely on other people making decisions about other people. So all doors have to be knocked on.
That covers it all, yeah. Abdel, what doors do you think need to be knocked on?
Decision makers' doors, politicians, mayors, city council representatives. Those are the people that bring the words to DC, where the bigger decisions are made. Congressman, Kader, our local congressman, is very active, comes visit the masjid, the mosque. When he got elected, he came and greeted and told us what he's about, and told us that his doors were open. Those are the kinds of leaders we need. And those are the people we need to go to and make sure they get our voices heard where the decisions are made in Washington, D.C. And I don't see who else's door we need to knock. We need to knock those people's door. We put them there to represent us.
Good, thank you, Larry.
I think that it's very important to have a good relationship with your elected representatives, to make your priorities known, to get their, at least let them know what's going on, and you know, if they're not responsive to you, you need to find someone that is responsive to you. And you know, we go back to getting out the vote and rally your troops to and campaign for folks that will, you know, that have your best interests in mind. This is a democratic society, so we may not prevail, but you need to make that effort. And I think that those are the doors that you knock on, the ones that can do the most good. I think Regina said the ones that control the purse strings. I think that to me it's more the legislators, the commission members, the city council members, the assembly members, and senators, congressmen, and U.S. senators.
Thank you, Francisco.
I think that, as my fellow panelists have mentioned, is just making sure that you reach out to the elected officials. They are the ones who were voted in by us as a community group, and therefore they have a civic duty to represent the needs of our community. Making sure that we use that as building bridges towards getting issues resolved and holding them accountable when certain issues do come up, to make sure that we remind them that they are a representation of the given entity or current body of whatever community is going through said issues. And we need to make sure that we collaboratively show up at the door knocking. It's not just one person, one group. There's issues that we go knocking together, and we let those officials know that, hey, these issues need to be resolved. And we voted you in, and we want to make sure that you take matters at hand. And if you need to, there's people in the community that can help resolve said issues. But collaborating together and towards our elected officials is the way that we need to start.
Yeah, thank you. So 2 things. One, about the issue of collaboration. Just to mention that the ACLU has collaborated with all of the groups represented here. The Brown versus Board of Education 1954 was a collaboration between the ACLU and the NAACP. The Fred Korematsu case, I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but the ACLU was the only organization to represent a Japanese American who was resisting internment. And even though we took his case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled against him, they ruled the internment was correct. That was later overturned, and it's really interesting to see that the justification used to intern him is very similar to the justification used by the current administration for the Muslim ban. National security, a term. So we're right back where we were then, but we're still in the fight together. And of course, it was the ACLU that opposed the Muslim ban, first, second, and third Muslim bans. Our local chapter was involved with LULAC, the Castroville chapter, a number of years ago because of racial profiling. And we helped co-sponsor a series of 3 events with people from the community. Like for 2 hours, for 3 nights came to talk about how the police had abused them. And that ended up with the police, the sheriff, it was the sheriff, with the sheriff established an office there to reestablish kind of trust within the community and to stop that practice. So I think it's really important that all the groups work together. And the one thing about the ACLU is that it works on issues. There are the groups here where we would be on opposite sides of the table on some issues, but the issues that we're together. And that makes for strength. And then one more thing before I ask the panel, to one bit of advice before we ask them questions, that we give what people can do concretely, like right now, almost, is to mention the district attorneys. I think it was very astute to go to the district attorney, and the ACLU has had a program this year called Know Your DA, because you realize that the pathway to the criminal justice system is through the DA, because he has the power to charge people. And so just to provide transparency so that people know exactly what the DA is doing, to approach their DAs, in fact, to have some contested races. There hasn't been a contested DA race in Monterey County in how many years? A long time. And so, by looking at those elected officials and kind of asking for transparency, asking for accountability, I think, we have a chance of making some really concrete change. So before we ask for questions, if you could give one bit of advice to people in the audience, what can they do to make a difference right now? Aside from joining our organizations and supporting them financially.
That's a given.
Larry, you want to start?
To me, the most important thing is to vote and encourage all your friends to register and vote. You look at the percentage of registered voters that actually voted recently are pretty low. 20%, 30%. There's anyway, vote. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Vote, but vote in the right people. I think a person like Regina, when you hear her speak, you know she's not a professional politician. And those are the people we do not want to represent us. We want the real grassroots representatives, people that care about us. And we find them from talking to them and from meeting them. So enough of politicians, we need the real people out there.
Yeah, I concur with what both of them have said in terms of the vote. I also think that the great late Ella Baker said, until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, as is important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons, then we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The other thing is there's an African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what all of us can do in here to make a difference.
I think that by having dialogue is the essence to making a difference. It's knowing that it's okay to not know everything, to be open to hear about new perspectives, different backgrounds, different ideas, and coming to a collective middle ground. Not looking at it as a compromise, because a compromise makes it seem like you're giving up something in a negative way. But through dialogue and getting to know people of different perspectives and backgrounds, you get an idea of how you can make a difference. What might not work for you, from your perspective, doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong. It might be that you just might need a few pointers or ideas or a different set of eyes to kind of help you see things from a different perspective. How I've lived my life, I have some experiences, but people, for example, here in public, in the audience, might have lived life in a different way and can share an insight from a different perspective. And by that, they educate me, and we educate each other in life, and that's how we can go about it. is by setting dialogue and making a change, realizing that it's not, if I'm stuck or if I'm feeling something, or if I'm going through some type of travesty, there are people out there that can set that through dialogue can chime in and maybe give me that one piece of missing advice that can help me or the community move forward with said issues. So just being open to dialogue and having being open-minded about perspectives of other people. That's how we make connections and move forward.
Before questions, let's just thank the panel. Well, I know there's only one question that's come up, and it's kind of a technical one, a little bit, and I'm not familiar with AB 84, which is a bill before the Assembly, but the basic question has to do with campaign finance and transparency from donors. In other words, so what are you, I guess we can ask it in a more general way since I'm not.
Do you want me to explain?
No, that's okay. About the more specifics of arguing the bill, but rather, should there be limits on campaign finances, and should there be transparency of donors? So just anyone want to talk about it? We don't have to talk, just anyone who wants to
Okay,
respond.
yeah, I do think that the Fair Political Practices Commission already has some standards, but I don't see why people can't disclose who's giving them money. I mean, I think that transparency is extremely important, and I think that, I don't know about the bill, I haven't researched or read it or anything, but I do know that, I don't really think it's necessary to have limits unless there's some illegal thing going on behind closed doors, but I do think transparency is definitely something that should happen.
Anyone else want to comment? Yeah, I might just say this is an issue which is, I think, the ACLU has grappled with. It really hasn't kind of fully resolved. But it's kind of, when you read that suddenly all these donations are being made to the Republican Party and the companies that got tax breaks, you have to wonder. If you want, maybe the preliminary question is, if you want to believe in the system, is that something that's going to make people believe in the system? Or is it going to undermine your confidence in the system? So, okay. Okay, well, this is more a comment, just that the person would like to see 50% of women represented on the panel. And I must admit I thought of that myself. Do you think the judicial branch can provide enough of a check on the other branches to protect our civil rights?
The approval of the Muslim ban shows otherwise. The Supreme Court okayed such an executive order in 2018 in America. You got to question that court. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, and just think of the Fred Korematsu case also. Okay, the Fred Korematsu case where the Supreme Court ruled against it, said that the government detention because of national security was justified, which is the same exact argument they're using on the Muslim ban. It's interesting how some of these things come up. The ACLU of Northern California every year gave an Earl Warren Award in Civil Liberties. And then someone pointed out to them that Earl Warren signed the order for the evacuation of the Japanese to concentration camps in California. So they changed it. They changed the award to the Chief Justice Earl Warren, because once he got to the Supreme Court, his views changed entirely. So I think there are defeats, and I think right now we're feeling very uneasy about, having trust in the judiciary, given the way the Supreme Court is lined up. So, okay, and this is for Francisco Lopez, and this has to do with a recent event where Ricardo Fierro, a LULAC council president, was detained by ICE in Racine, Wisconsin. Do you know? So, do you have an update on that?
I know that our recently national elected national president, Domingo Garcia, has taken matters into it, and so it's an ongoing issue that affected one of our own members. He's taking matters into it through our legal extension branch, Lopez, and the resources at the national level and locally in Wisconsin to support Fierro. And so it is being addressed at the national level and spearheaded by our national president.
Good, thank you. So what efforts do you or your organization engage in to help educate the white comfortable community and show them that it's us, that gains for non-whites are not losses for whites? Comfortable apathy is a huge obstacle in my observation, as is fear of losing ground as middle-class whites. So,
One of the things is speaking truth to power and to not be afraid to be honest. You don't have to be angry. I mean, one needs only look at the data to suggest, what is happening to people of color in Monterey County and beyond. So I think also having, being open to, even with groups that you may not traditionally work with, having dialogue to let them know that this is what's going on and opening up that dialogue, because even though people may have this ideology of white supremacy, but when they hear, because oftentimes white people are not aware of what's really going on in communities of color, because they're very comfortable. They've got doors open for them. So they don't have to think about, police officers on campus, my child is going to get arrested, because they tend to arrest, statistically, from a data perspective, children of color. So, I think that that's my answer to that.
No, I have to admit that we live in a very special area. As a Muslim community in Monterey, our mosque is in Seaside on Allen Street. And every time there's been issues coming from our current president, people have called in and say, you have our support. Most of these people are white. They're not Muslims. They say, if you need our support, you let us know. Can we come and meet you? Some have even come and assisted our congregation that's held every Friday in the afternoon. So we have a very special community. Right? It's just that a lot of work is to be done. Right? You could support, but it's also important that you let your voice heard, that you disagree with the name calling and rhetorics. But we have a very special community in Monterey County. Wanted to say that.
I'd like to echo that statement. The example that we have is when our community was returning from the internment camps in 1945, there was a group of residents that circulated a petition welcoming the Japanese back to the Monterey Peninsula. And this was not done anywhere else, in the United States. So it is a special community. And I think that that's also, a detriment, because maybe it's the education level of this area or the water. I've traveled around the United States and I've seen the different attitudes that you run into, even on the east side of California, the mountains, or Merced and east of Merced. There's a real shift in the attitude of folks.
You're in trouble.
My wife's looking for me. I think that if you look at the results of the election from 2016 is where the votes came from. The East Coast, I think maybe, and the West Coast were Democratic, but the whole middle part of the country was Republican. So, as much as we try to do here, as I mentioned before, we were, living in a dream world. Our true battle lies in the middle part of the country. And, the JACL has programs that are trying to teach the internment what happened during World War II, to try to give other communities an idea of what happened and why it happened. But we're a small organization. We can't go to every school. But we try to send out our videos and lesson plans for teachers, but they have to utilize it. So we have a huge battle. It's going to take a huge effort, and it's not going to happen right away. We're trying to change people's attitudes, and that's going to be generations worth of work. So let's get going.
And I might mention, I just have to bring Fighting for Justice, Fred Korematsu Speaks Up, a book by Laura Atkins and Stan Yogi, which has recently been published. And actually, the ACLU gave out, I think it's a school book. It's to educate school children. And also the JACLU is sponsoring a film, a 30-minute film for the schools, which will talk about the internment to educate students. But I certainly agree with Larry about education, but also about the JAC. This was a comment, not a question. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the first group to reach out to Muslims was the JACL. And then one quick one, I'll just throw this out too, because I know, Larry, you can't make this decision, but will the JACL be willing to hold a debate of local political candidates starting with the House of Representatives? So that's, I guess, for your board to consider. And then maybe we'll just start with one last question. And this is, I think, maybe just too big for us to even tackle, but we'll just very briefly, since corporate power and war economy are so strong, so based on fear, are we really a democracy now? Well, we will just leave us with that question. And maybe end on something happier, which is just